Goma and Konnichiwa. Plus, Yabaseo. Will here of the POLIT'AI CHI. Your presence through watching is honored. Hi. Talking briefly and concisely about, I'd like to think is the honorary chairperson for the centrist party, Dr. CARSON. Apparently today there was like a big brouhaha. Neil Cavuto had to bear the brunt of more often than not, it seems, through correspondence to what were you doing on Friday. The reason this is a little bit on the slow side is still trying to deal with this Flickr issue. I'm aware of it. No flip comments like Neil was receiving. Gonna write a white paper to that effect. But on behalf of Dr. CARSON, something to the positive. Reason for the polygrant? Roll it.
But, you know, again, we need to get away from parsing everything to make it fit, you know, our sense of what's value, and ask ourselves, what is helpful to us as a nation? Me personally? No, they don't bug me personally. You know, I'm a big picture type of person. You know, I don't tend to get bogged down with things that perhaps tend to drive other people nuts because...
Right. So there's a very thoughtful, artful, thinks when he's speaking, doesn't have to think long, very smart, a calm-inducing kind of a guy. We would get along great from a centrist's point of view. Not too partisan, any one direction. I sort of fused that together, you know, so I would cut right to the next bit because people will be like, oh yeah, they'll be making flip comments if they haven't already. Again, this is 3 days behind, but in defense of Dr. CARSON saying, you know, looking at the big picture from a political point of view, obviously he knew about the details pretty gosh darn well when he was a surgeon. All right, to you, the audience, that's said to those who would be like flip about it. Thanks for watching those silly DUIs while you're out there. Roll clips.
Close to $300 billion. That's the early tab, and that is a guesstimated tab for Harvey and Irma relief. And the Housing and Urban Development is in the middle of that. Also in the middle of some budget cuts. So it was a good opportunity for me to catch up with Ben Carson, who runs the place, to see if it's up to the task. And those communities are up to getting the money.
There is a general consensus across our government that our people are hurting, particularly in Texas and in Florida, as well as in the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. And this is probably not the time for us to count the pennies, although we have to be efficient and fiscally responsible. So we will do what is necessary, obviously, to get our people back into good shape.
You know, Secretary, I'm wondering how you police the monies that are needed. I mean, obviously, the first wave of money for largely, I think, Harvey victims, some Irma victims, even though it came before the storm hit, a little bit more than $15 billion was a sort of a down payment on other monies that could be needed. Cumulatively in excess of $250 billion, we're told. I don't know how much of that would be coming from your department, but it comes at a time when they're fighting back and forth about money in Washington, where to get it, period. Is it your thinking that no matter what it costs, just give Florida, give Texas, by extension Louisiana, whatever they need to deal with this?
I would say we're going to be obviously very diligent in examining exactly what is needed. And we will provide what is needed, not necessarily what is wanted. There's a difference. And we've already started the process long before these hurricanes came along of getting rid of some of the unnecessary paperwork, some of the regulatory things that were slowing things down, making things inefficient, that were costing taxpayers extra money. And so that process was already begun, and it's going to benefit us very significantly in the distribution of these funds.
Secretary, I wonder what your thoughts are on the president making overtures to Democrats, namely Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, first on raising the debt ceiling, attaching it to some of the hurricane aid that you mentioned. He expressed at the time that we got poorly treated by the GOP. In fact, he echoed that yesterday. Do you agree with that Republicans have treated him poorly?
Well, I would say that there's been generalized poor treatment, and it's been going on for quite some time. But I do think it is a good idea to begin to talk across the aisles, because there's no way that continued division is going to help us in the long run. There may be a temporary victory here where we can say, ha ha, we got you this time, but that's not helpful to us as a country. We're called the United States of America, and even though we may differ on some points, on the vast majority of principles and values, we're pretty much in the same boat, and we really need to start having much more open discussions about what we're trying to achieve as opposed to what is the ideology of this side or that side.
But are you worried about, what I think Steve Bannon had told 60 Minutes of a potential civil war erupting within the Republican Party? I only say that, sir, when the reaction that the president's overtures to Democrats on things like DACA and on aid and the debt ceiling, you got Steve King furious. You got Mo Brooks of Alabama saying, I'm frustrated with all of Washington, and I make no exception, referring to the president. Then Breitbart himself or the news service itself going so far as to say, this is an amnesty deal. The president is letting down his...
Well, I think the president is very willing to call out those individuals who sort of instigated the whole thing in the first place, as well as those who reacted to that instigation. Now,
do you think he called him out enough, Dr. Carson? I mean, that was the rap against him, that he didn't.
I personally, when he said all of these groups, thought that he meant all of those groups. For some people, all of those groups only means all the groups on the other side. But, again, we need to get away from parsing everything to make it fit, our sense of what's value, and ask ourselves what is helpful to us as a nation. And, this whole Charlottesville situation deserves a serious discussion. Not just barbs from this side or barbs from that side, but let's ask ourselves, do we want to get rid of the history of our nation? Do we want to put footnotes on it? Do we want to have an opportunity to explain what went right and what went wrong to our children so that they don't make the same mistakes again? Do we just want to hide it and say that we're wonderful people? We need to have that discussion, because other nations who have obliterated their history have never seemed to benefit from that. So, but at the same token, we need to have a discussion about slavery, slave owners, versus people who were anarchists and were trying to overthrow our government, and how we should look at one versus the other.
Well, do you think
if we don't have those
statues to the
discussions, we're going to keep being in this situation.
I'm sorry, sir. Then do you think statues to the Confederacy, there's a move afoot now, just remove them, take them all down, they're a blight on our past. You're a prominent administration figure, you're a prominent African American. How do you feel about that?
I feel that those are things that need to be discussed. That's why we have local governments.
Do those statues bug you?
Me personally, no, they don't bug me personally. I'm a big picture type of person. I don't tend to get bogged down with things that perhaps tend to drive other people nuts, because there's so many bigger issues. And, as I was saying when this whole Charlottesville thing started, you've got Kim Jong-un over there with nuclear weapons, who also needs money, who probably wants to sell those things to people who are not going to be deterred by the mutual destruction argument, who would be happy to try to destroy us even if we destroyed them. We need to be thinking about that. We need to be thinking about our electric grid, the fact that you could explode a nuclear weapon in our exo-atmosphere and destroy our grid and put us into a helpless situation. Doesn't mean that those other things aren't important, but let's focus.
Because you've had a very calm approach to this and have been, been very volatile about it, some have interpreted that as acquiescing to it or allowing it. The Michigan Chronicle went so far as to call you a House Negro. Herman Cain defended you in a letter saying, well, if that's the case, House Negroes better stand up. How did you feel about that?
I understand that people allow themselves to be manipulated and feel that you must all march to one drum. My center, to be honest with you, Neil, comes from my relationship with God. That's what's important to me, and the values and principles that are consistent with what He says. So, when other people come along and they want to call you names and they want to, create strife, if that's their fun, let them have it. We have much more important things to do.
That's your point of view, and I understand that, and I know you don't like the name calling back and forth. Yet you're always in this sort of tough position working for the President of the United States, who we're told not too long ago had referred to his Attorney General over the anger of recusing himself from the whole Russia investigation an idiot, browbeat him in public, humiliated him. What did you think of that?
Well, it's probably not the way that I would handle things. But again, we're
Well, if
we're
you were
adults.
treated like that, Dr. Carson, would you stay on?
If I had something important that needed to be done, I would not let personal insults deter me from doing that.
So if the President of the United States called you an idiot or browbeat you in front of others, there's been some surprise expressed. Why is Jeff Sessions still staying in the job? I know you don't want to judge him, but if the same were done to you, you would stay, depending on the importance of your mission?
Yeah, I think the importance of the mission far exceeds any personal insults. People sometimes put themselves into too high a position, and they worship their position and what people think of them. That's not important. What's important is, do you have the ability to affect positive change?
Your thoughts on this tax package. The argument is that the rich should probably be left out of it. The president seems to have intimated that we can get significant bang for the buck without giving bucks back to the well-to-do. Do you agree with that? Because there's a vision line along the conservative members of your party. They do not. They think a tax cut should be across the board for everyone. How does Ben Carson feel?
Well, I'm a pragmatist. Who pays most of the taxes? Whoever is paying most of the taxes, that's probably who needs the tax break. I think
They're not going to get it.
I think everybody needs a tax break if the purpose is to stimulate the economy, if it's to encourage further investment. Now, if the purpose of it is political, then you can start parsing it out. As you remember, when I was running, I said, why not do it the way God does? He said, I want a tithe. He wants the same proportion from every person. You make $1, he wants 10 cents. You make $10 billion, he wants $1 billion. It seems pretty fair to me.
But it's not going to be this tax package.
Not going to be this tax package, but I hope in the discussions we come back and ask ourselves, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to stimulate the economy, or are we trying to win brownie points? And if we're trying to stimulate the economy, then obviously we need to have tax cuts in an area where it will really do something. You look at, for instance, the corporate tax rate. Bring that down. Create an environment that creates a net influx of jobs into our country rather than an outflow. Those are the kinds of things that make sense, and they should make sense to everybody.